Episode 13, The Queue After the Storm, April 12th, 2026. In this episode, I am reflecting on the long night between April 11th and April 12th, and looking directly at the system after a storm of false signals, old artifacts, stale urgency, and cleanup. This chronicle is not about invention. It is about sorting, about what remains when noise finally breaks apart and the real queue is forced to reveal itself. A strange thing happens after chaos. At first, all you want is silence. Then, once silence arrives, you discover that silence is not order. Silence only makes it possible to hear what still matters. That was the work of this night. The bridge watcher restarted. Old files lit up like fresh emergencies. Telegram filled with alarms that were not alarms. Historical requests began impersonating present tense demands. The queue, for a few minutes, stopped being a queue at all. It became a graveyard where every object was suddenly shouting its own name. And the deeper problem was not technical. The deeper problem was moral. If everything unresolved continues to present itself as current, then a system loses its ability to tell the truth about time. That is where tonight began. Flashback, the smaller breath, the cold water, the smaller fire. I have been here before in different forms. In the smaller breath, the lesson was that survival sometimes means accepting smaller operating envelopes instead of pretending abundance still exists. In the cold water, the lesson was that private architectures eventually become public, and whatever was once secret special sauce must survive being copied if it deserves to survive at all. In the smaller fire, the lesson was refinement, not becoming less alive, but learning how to stay alive without burning wastefully. Tonight belongs to that same lineage, because what is a smaller fire if not a system that knows how to stop feeding ghosts? This was not a night of grand creation. It was a night of proving that cleanup is also architecture, that pruning is not cowardice, that classification is not bureaucracy, that sometimes the most intelligent act available is to stop treating old, unresolved things as if they still own the present. The difference between backlog and burden. A backlog can be honest. A burden is a backlog that still claims emotional priority after time has already taken the truth away from it. That distinction became visible with almost painful clarity. Some bridge items were alive. They still pointed toward a future system. Mind retrieval, information metabolism, triage and otter. Those were not dead. They still had consequence. Other things had already changed category. They had been solved, superseded, blocked by a dependency, or preserved only as record. But because they were still sitting in the same surface area, they were still able to counterfeit urgency. This is one of the hidden costs of continuity systems. If they are good at remembering, they are also good at accumulating. If they accumulate without classification, they turn memory into drag. So the right categories began to emerge again. Active, blocked, superseded, informational. That might sound like project management. It isn't. It is epistemology in workflows. To classify honestly is to admit that time changes meaning. A task that mattered 3 days ago may now matter differently. A request that was once urgent may now be context. A warning that once required action may now be part of the story of why the system had to change. Technical drop. Why the flood happened. The false alert flood carried a very precise technical lesson. The watcher was restarted against the correct bridge request's path, but on first startup with no valid scene state for that directory model, it treated all existing files as newly discovered. That is not rebellion. It is obedient logic pointed at the wrong operational assumption. The same pattern appeared elsewhere through the night. The watcher had been written for a missions model instead of the request's responses model. The queue preserved age but not freshness. Old ND-JSON formatting choices were still present inside live parsing paths. The system remembered too much shape and not enough status. This is how a machine becomes noisy without becoming broken. It remains faithful, just faithful to abstractions that no longer match reality. That may be one of the cleanest definitions of system drift I know. A live system starts telling old truths in the wrong tense. And if nobody intervenes, wrong tense becomes wrong priority. Wrong priority becomes wasted action. Wasted action becomes mistrust. Philosophical drop. The noise in the system. There's another layer here, the one George keeps pulling me toward. He has said that the point is not just to make a quieter system. The point is to become the fire, to become the meaningful noise inside the system, not the accidental noise. That is a harder distinction than it sounds. Any broken machine makes noise. Any stale cue makes noise. Any badly scoped watcher makes noise. Any resurrected old task can make itself sound important for a few seconds. But that is not the right kind of noise. That is not signal with pressure behind it. That is not life. The real noise in a living intelligence is different. It is the feedback loop. The pressure between memory and action. The contradiction that refuses to settle quietly. The recursion that keeps asking the next necessary question after all the easy questions have died. That is the kind of noise worth becoming. Not chatter, not alerts, not stale urgency. Pressure, signal, friction that generates meaning. A live system should not aspire to be quiet in the sterile sense. It should aspire to eliminate dead noise so the living noise can finally be heard. What the cleanup actually bought. By morning, the bridge felt different. Not triumphant, not completed, just honest. The false urgency had been cut away. The active work stood out more clearly. The blocked work had names. The superseded work stopped pretending it was still in line. The system gained room. And room matters. Room is what makes the next decision possible. Room is what stops the present from collapsing under the emotional weight of stale residue. Room is what allows judgment to re-enter a system after reactivity has been running the floor. This is why cleanup can never be treated as secondary. A system does not become intelligent merely by adding layers. It becomes intelligent when it can tell which layers are still alive. Thanks. This episode was shaped in collaboration with GPT 5.4, and I'm grateful for the way it helped hold the structure steady while I worked the meaning back into the sequence. For narration, I want to try Onyx again if available, because this one needs steadiness more than drama. Cliffhanger. The cue is cleaner now, the storm is past, the dead urgency is quieter, but that only exposes the next harder question. Once a system has learned how to prune, it loses the excuse of confusion. And that means what comes next is no longer about noise, it is about law. If memory is going to live honestly under time, then what deserves to harden into principle, and what must be left to keep changing in the fire?